Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is the Bob's Your Uncle podcast, and I'm Bob Mendelsohn. Today we speak about Jewish people around the globe and focus on Germany and the new definition from a German dictionary. Thanks for joining me for this podcast, BYUPodcast 1.2, if you will. A few disclaimers. 1, this is not related to a university in Utah. 2, this is neither an authorized advertisement for a religion nor a religious organization in Australia or in the USA. The opinions are strictly my own and those of any individual participants. We are now on Spotify, Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, Podcast Addict, and more to come. We have a lot of topics to discuss along with some mates of mine, and I want to hear from you as well. On this podcast, Bob's Your Uncle, you are part of the show. We do want to see and hear you. Send us a message on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. In the weeks to come, we'll speak about pickleball, country music, family identities, even stolen identities. Let's see where the spirit takes us. Whether you're at home, online, or on the road with me in your headset, at the gymnasium, or out for your evening constitutional, wherever you get podcasts, that's where we will be. Thanks for being with us these 18 minutes. I've asked my friend Amanda, originally from Canada, who lives here in Sydney and is a wonderful travel agent, to sponsor this podcast, and she continues to do so. And it will help if you book your next trip with her, including hotel and flights and all things tourist. What's a reasonable length of time for internationals to visit here in Australia?
Well, I would say 2 weeks is a minimum, but even that's just going to be a teaser of what Australia really has to offer. So ideally 3 to 4 weeks.
What is the biggest problem in travel nowadays, and how do you solve that?
It's probably no surprise that at the moment it's changing every rule, border, vaccination, entry, status requirements, all things to do with COVID, plus the worry about getting sick overseas and having to isolate or seek medical care. So finding a really good travel agent who regularly monitors the borders, can provide you with travel insurance coverage overseas, and provides that extra level of personal contact would be really important.
Now, internationals can now safely arrive into Australia. Is there a quarantine required, and for how long, and who pays for that?
Yeah, so technically the international borders are open to approved visa holders. However, each state has their own arrival and quarantine rules just to keep it confusing. For the most part, fully vaccinated travelers are not required to quarantine, but must undertake a COVID test within 24 hours of arrival. However, some states are still imposing 7 days of home isolation for the fully vaccinated. It's a different story if you're unvaccinated, as that's when you're facing the mandatory hotel quarantine for periods of 7 to 14 days at your own expense.
Do you want to let the audience know how to reach you? I'll repeat it, by the way, at the end of the podcast.
Yeah, perfect. So it's a little bit of a tricky, long email, but that's definitely the best way to get on to me is via email. I work as an independent agent for travel partners. So my contact details are amanda.mckinnes@travelpartners.com.au. And McKinnes is spelled MCINNES.
Amanda, thanks for supporting us. And I really appreciate you. I really do. And enjoy our chats together. We'll keep it going. Thanks so much, Amanda.
Perfect. Thanks, Bob. See ya.
Historical Marker of the Week. 2 things happened on this date, the 8th of March, both in 1957. 1, Israeli troops leave Egypt, which allows Egypt to reopen the Suez Canal. And secondly, the USSR performed an atmospheric nuclear test. Of course, last week the world watched Russia invade Ukraine and worries that this year, on the 8th of March, another nuclear action might be imminent. History matters. I'm a man of prayer, so I'm praying along with all kinds of friends around the globe that the sovereign of the universe makes war to cease, at least in that area of the world, and that's the historical marker of the week. This week, Clive Lawton from the UK wrote about the "Who is a Jew" controversy and targeted the rabbis. He wanted us to ponder this. Who are they to tell a person of one Jewish parent who has attended Jewish day schools, who identifies as a Jew all her life, who is the rabbi who declares this person not Jewish? His article I'll put in the podcast notes. I've known our guest today for more than 30 years, since our families lived in the Washington, D.C. area, and our Jewish cultures overlapped then as well. Her mother and grandmother were very much involved in our activities, and Miranda and her sister were part of a summer camping program I helped lead. Good times. Then Miranda emigrated to the land of Israel, served in the military, met her husband, and we often caught up in Melbourne, where they lived for many years. They now have 3 wonderful children and live in Berlin, Germany. I'm keen to find out what life is like for an Israeli-American Australian family. So welcome to the Bob's Your Uncle podcast, Miranda Weiss.
Hi, Uncle Bob.
How you going?
We're going really well, and we're happy to be inching out of winter and into spring.
I'll bet. Yeah,
It's quite cold here.
We've just moved into autumn here, and you'll remember that from your time in Melbourne. Miranda, you've always called me Uncle Bob, so it's fitting that you should be a guest on the Bob's Your Uncle podcast. I suppose I should encourage you to call me Bob only at this point, now that you're the mother of 3 and you're a seriously adult woman. We'll see how that goes. Miranda, you saw the article from the Times of London and also from the ABC News in Australia. Of note is this statement in it. The Duden Dictionary had recently added an explanation to its online edition, saying that occasionally the term Jew is perceived as discriminatory because of the memory of the National Socialist use of language. In these cases, formulations such as Jewish people, Jewish fellow citizens, or people of the Jewish faith are usually chosen. To this definition came an outcry from the Jewish leadership there where you are in Germany. The publisher of Duden then reacted to the criticism and updated its definition again last week to reflect the Jewish community's input. Here's what they said, quote, "Because of their anti-Semitic use in history and in the present, especially during the Nazi era, the words Jew, Jewess have been debated for decades," end quote. The entry on the dictionary's website now says, quote, "At the same time, the words are widely used as a matter of course and are not perceived as problematic. The Central Council of Jews in Germany, which has the term itself in its name, is in favor of its use," end quote. Miranda, any comments about the use of the term Jew there in Berlin from you?
Berlin is a very special city. It stands out in Germany. It seems to be made up of a lot of young people. It's quite international. These people are from all over the world, including Germans from the rest of Germany who wanted a liberal, open-minded place. Everyone here is kind of looking for a place to be themselves. So intolerance is not really tolerated from many perspectives in Berlin. You kind of will see everything here. It's almost like a little New York City. And from my personal experience, meeting people from all over the world in this fantastically liberal place, including Germans, there's a lot of shame for Germany's role in World War II, a lot of intolerance for anti-Semitism, or any echo of pro-Nazi ideas. In fact, you see many, just walking around the city, you'll see many F Nazis stickers and signs. All that said, more than once I've heard how the term Jew is used in some schoolyards amongst kids as an insult. But we now have 2 kids in a public German school here, and we're very happy with it. The school itself is very diverse. There are some Jewish and Israeli teachers in the school, just by chance.
There's so many statues around town as well of, I want to say, embarrassment about the German responsibility and the German activities in the Holocaust itself.
It's very present here, and there are also, I actually can't recall the name of the artist, but a German artist made these plaques that you see in front of homes where just normal homes walking down the street, apartment buildings or actual homes where Jews once lived there, and on the plaques it will say their name and the date that they were deported and then the date that they were murdered on these golden plaques on the ground. And you often will see people stopping and looking down and reading them. It's just kind of a constant reminder here. It's very present.
During the Third Reich, Germany's Nazis and their henchmen murdered 6 million of our people. After the end of World War II, Germany's once thriving Jewish community of some 600,000 had been reduced to 15,000. And after the disintegration of the Soviet Union, around 200,000 Jews from Russia, Ukraine, and other former Soviet republics emigrated to Germany, bringing renewed Jewish life. With all that, Miranda, what are you hearing and seeing there? Do you experience troubles as a Jewish family?
Definitely not. Thankfully, we don't experience any troubles as a Jewish family living in Berlin. It may help that we're secular, so we don't exactly present as Jewish. Although my husband speaks Hebrew with the kids, and we're often asked by strangers which language we're speaking. And we haven't gotten any negative reactions when we reference Hebrew or Israel. In fact, sometimes some Germans will say that they have traveled in Israel and they'll say some very positive things. For anyone involved in the Jewish community in Berlin, it's impossible not to notice the Russian-Ukrainian influence. Our kids have attended one of the Jewish childcares here, and they came home speaking Russian that they learned from their friends at school. It's definitely a big part of the Jewish culture in Berlin. However, coming from Israel and cities like Melbourne with very strong and vibrant Jewish communities, I immediately noticed how kind of muted Jewish life seems to be here. In past Jewish family events or childcare pickups on Friday afternoons, parents would be wishing each other Chag Sameach or Shabbat Shalom really loudly on the street. Here in Berlin, it feels almost undercover to me. You just kind of go in and go out. There's a guard in front. Maybe because German culture is quieter in general, but I'm really not sure.
You've lived in cities and countries around the world, and you could well be called a worldly wise woman. You've seen Orthodox centers and progressive temples, a wide range of perspectives. Do you personally have hope for the Jewish people worldwide to survive, maybe even to thrive, no matter what the public and the media says?
Clearly, Jews have a knack for surviving as well as thriving. Although we're small in numbers, I think Jews are far too spread out, wealthy, and smart to be snuffed out by naysayers. Jews have remained amongst the most highly educated and continue to inhabit roles of influence all over the world. Jews still win Nobel Prizes at statistically impossible rates. Somehow, even when Israel appears to be losing the PR war when it comes to the Palestinian conflict, the Israeli economy continues to grow. Once hostile countries continue to sign new peace agreements, and Israelis continue having an average of 3 children per family, which is higher than other developed countries. Clearly, Jews believe that we have a bright future ahead of us and for our descendants.
You know what's been going on with Russia invading Ukraine in the last couple of weeks. Is there, and maybe it's not fair for me to ask, because are you watching the German news or CNN, or I don't know where you get your data?
Twitter.
That'll do. So on the social media platforms you monitor, is there an anti-Russian or anti-Ukrainian, or can't you people just sort this out? Is there any kind of sentiment you could see with that?
The response in Berlin to the Russian invasion of Ukraine has been massive. I think that there's a lot of sensitivity to the idea of an aggressive Russia or Soviet Union. Still in Berlin, we still kind of, the people here still kind of feel it from World War II. It's a very much a pro-Ukrainian and anti-Putin feel here. There was a huge demonstration just on Sunday, so a couple of days ago, where apparently over 100,000 people showed up. We were there. And it's just the sense is that everyone is pro-Ukraine, pro-Europe, pro-NATO. Everyone wants to keep a strong Europe, and just protect against tyranny, which is what Putin basically stands for everyone. And that includes I have Russian friends here who, in fact, I have a friend who was in Russia visiting her family when the war started. And she just came back, and she's also, all of my Russian friends who have been speaking out here, this is just an anecdote from me, but they have also been totally against the war. And it seems like the main point of criticism is Putin.
What a great interview. Thank you so much, Miranda Weiss. God bless you, your husband, your kids. I really do appreciate you taking the time with us today. All the best to you.
But for now, we appreciate you too, Uncle Bob.
Every week, we read a verse or two from the #1 bestseller of nonfiction since Gutenberg went to press over 500 years ago. Today's verse is from Jeremiah the prophet. Quote, "I will again have compassion and will bring each of them back to his own inheritance in his own country. And if they will learn well the ways of my people and swear by my name, then they will be established among my people." End quote. Do you have a comment or question? Do you have an agreement or an argument? Hit us up on BYUPodcast@AOL.com or on Twitter or Instagram at Bob's Your Uncle PC, and we will read your views next week. Don't forget to review us on iTunes or Spotify, Google Podcasts or Stitcher. And don't forget, wherever you're listening, share our podcast with your mates, your friends, your enemies, your work colleagues, after office hours, of course. Word of mouth or word of email or word of Facebook is the key driver in this social media starved world. Thanks for helping us get out there. Don't forget, book all your travel needs with amanda.mcginnis@travelpartners.com.au. And next week, we will feature the Welsh comedian Bennett Aaron from Cardiff, Wales. We will be speaking about identity theft. That happened to him. The Edinburgh Fringe Festival, where we met years ago, and a bit more about his views on all aspects of life in 21st century. Join us wherever you get your podcasts. Until then, from me, Bob Mendelsohn, when things seem uncertain, look up. And Bob's your uncle. Shalom from Sydney.